We're planning to spend the summer at your seaside home. That includes Stephanie, our children, and her mom and dad. Feel free to use the rear bedroom while we occupy the primary suite. These weren't suggestions from my son Patrick. They came as firm declarations, uttered with the effortless arrogance he'd mastered from an early age. I clutched my cell phone more firmly, gazing at the sea panorama I'd purchased with Christopher's life insurance funds to greet each day. The rear bedroom, I echoed, even though I'd caught his words clearly. That space was scarcely big enough for a single bed and chest of drawers, designed initially for domestic staff, lacking an en-suite bath and offering no sight of the azure surf that had aided my recovery from sorrow over the last half-year. It just adds up, Mother, Patrick went on, his tone laced with that recognizable hint of exasperation. We've got 5 in our group, not counting Stephanie's folks. You're by yourself. Plus, you rise at dawn anyway. You won't be in there much regardless. I shut my eyes, envisioning my thoughtfully arranged primary suite with its pale aqua walls, the cozy spot for books where I'd set Christopher's beloved armchair, and the vintage cabinet showcasing our marriage picture next to the seashell assortment we began collecting during our post-wedding trip. When did you intend to show up? I inquired, sidestepping his reasoning entirely. Friday, and will remain until around the middle of August. Stephanie requires some downtime, and the youngsters are making her nuts stuck indoors. He stopped briefly, then tacked on like it was secondary. Her folks could benefit from the getaway as well. Her father's hypertension has been flaring lately. 3 months, with 7 individuals. My serene haven for retirement turning into a packed holiday spot, with me demoted to staff accommodations. I understand, was the only response I could muster. Excellent. Stephanie will message you a shopping list. Be certain to get plenty of Drake's power beverages. And Molly insists on the wheat-free poultry bites. The kind in the azure wrapping, not the emerald one. Once the conversation ended, I perched on my veranda rocker, observing the breakers pound the coastline as another surge of resentment, irritation, and what resembled defiance built within me. How would you handle this, Christopher? I murmured to the briny breeze. My departed spouse had forever served as the mediator between Patrick and myself. Gentle yet resolute, Christopher had excelled at affectionately ensuring our son faced consequences, while I often yielded to Patrick's wishes to preserve harmony. Following Christopher's abrupt brain hemorrhage a year and a half back, that mediator vanished and Patrick's presumptions had only escalated. My cell phone buzzed once more. Amelia, my offspring from my initial union, whom Christopher had cherished like his blood. Hi, Mother. Just seeing how things are. How's the coastal residence suiting you? I ended up pouring out the whole tale to her. Patrick's declaration, the exile to the small room, the 3-month takeover, complete with Stephanie's relatives, people I scarcely knew. Please say you're not truly entertaining this, Amelia responded once I'd concluded. Her straightforward pediatrician demeanor was precisely what I required. What options do I have? He's my child, and there are the grandkids. Mother, she cut in decisively. That seaside place was bought with Christopher's insurance payout. It's your property, the ideal spot for later years that you two envisioned for ages. Patrick lacks any claim to seize it and cram you into a tiny space all season. The reality is, I exhaled. I already agreed to it. I mentioned I'd get it all set. A silence followed. Then Amelia laughed softly. Well, if you're set on preparing everything, why not prepare it thoroughly? What are you suggesting? I mean, if they're determined to arrive uninvited and upend your routine without permission, maybe they ought to encounter the complete genuine Meredith Collins welcome experience. I caught myself grinning for the initial occasion since Patrick's contact. Go on. When our discussion wrapped up 60 minutes later, a scheme was taking shape, one that would have prompted Christopher to burst into hearty chuckles. My spouse had frequently remarked that I'd overlooked my true vocation in stage direction, considering my precision with particulars and talent for theatrics. Prior to concluding my account, kindly hit subscribe and share in the comments the hour you're tuning in. The following day, I strolled a couple of homes over to see my neighbor Jorge, a former music instructor who'd grown into a close companion since my relocation. Jorge, I mentioned while we trimmed his hibiscus plants side by side, I'd value your expert view. How intense can your saxophone sessions become, especially at daybreak? His gaze sparkled with playfulness. It varies based on the mouthpiece and if I'm running through exercises or aiming for tunes. And those audio systems you employ for your sound appreciation sessions. Top-tier quality. They can shake the pains if aimed right. By midweek, my setups were underway in earnest. I scoured every secondhand shop in a 20-mile radius, contacted Amelia's university housemate who currently managed a stage prop firm, and held multiple serious talks with area animal management experts regarding ethical approaches. I also enrolled in a rapid shipping service to guarantee specific supplies reached me promptly. On Thursday, I transferred my items from the primary suite, meticulously erasing all signs of the inviting retreat I'd crafted. Instead, I configured a setup that Stephanie, with her preference for simple aesthetics and fixation on spotless surroundings, would deem especially trying. I labored until dawn, installing, tweaking, verifying. By Friday's early hours, all was arranged. I had sufficient moments to bathe and dress prior to positioning myself on the entry veranda rocker with a tumbler of citrus drink, the epitome of matronly reception. At exactly 2:17 in the afternoon, Patrick's lease sport utility vehicle rolled into the drive. I observed as they stepped out sequentially, Patrick glancing at his device, even while lifting the rear hatch. Stephanie tweaking her high-end shades as she appraised my humble abode with thinly veiled dissatisfaction. Drake, 13, bent over his portable gaming unit. Molly, 10, already grumbling over the warmth. And at last, Stephanie's mom and dad, Harold and Evelyn, appearing as if they'd emerged from a golf club pamphlet, sporting coordinated designer-collared tops. "Mother," Patrick shouted with feigned zeal. We arrived sooner than anticipated. The roads were far less congested than predicted. I stood to receive them, my grin as tranquil as a statue's. "Greetings to all. I've anticipated your arrival." That wasn't wholly false. I had indeed looked forward to it, though not for the motives they could presume. "The residence appears charming," Stephanie noted, which in her lexicon signified underwhelming. "It suits our purposes ideally," I answered cordially. "Allow me to guide you indoors. I've set up all as specified." While escorting them past the entrance, I spotted Jorge glancing from his drapes 2 residences away. He offered an approving gesture before vanishing. "I've placed new linens in every washroom," I described as they trailed me within, readied all sleeping areas, and filled the pantry with each person's preferred items. Patrick acknowledged distractedly, already moving to the primary suite with their bags. "Wonderful, Mother. The trip wore us out. We'll likely unpack and rest a bit prior to the evening meal." "Naturally, sweetheart," I responded, my voice sweet as nectar. "Relax comfortably. I suspect this will be a season etched in your memories." As they vanished along the corridor, I eased into Christopher's former lounger, now ideally situated in the main room to overlook both the sea via the forward panes and the passage to the sleeping quarters. 3, 2, 1. "Mother." Patrick's shout echoed from the primary suite. "What's happening here?" I grinned and took a slow drink from my citrus beverage. Project Reclaim Sanctuary had formally launched. I enjoyed another relaxed swallow of my citrus drink as Patrick charged back into the main area, his cheeks red with outrage. "Mother, there's a full-scale cardboard figure of Father in the main bedroom. It's positioned beside the mattress, gazing right at it." "Indeed," I answered composedly. "I figured it would soothe you to sense your dad overseeing your time here." Christopher adored that space. Stephanie materialized behind Patrick, appearing much more ashen than upon entry. "Images of Christopher are scattered all over," she whispered sharply. "On the surfaces, beside the beds, even affixed to the overhead above the mattress. Scores of them, all observing." 47 precisely, I amended. 1 per year of our union. I discover it immensely reassuring to sense his essence, particularly after dark. At times, I truly believe I detect him observing my rest. Harold and Evelyn shared looks while tentatively peering into the main bedroom from the passage. "The linens on the bed," Evelyn started tentatively. "They display Christopher's likeness imprinted across them." "Tailor-crafted," I glowed with satisfaction. Aren't they marvelous? I invested generously. The cushion covers highlight enlargements of his gaze. They're astonishingly realistic in low light. Drake briefly pulled from his entertainment gadget, stuck his head inside the space, and promptly withdrew. That's incredibly eerie, grandmother. Eerie? I laid a palm on my chest in pretended dismay. Not at all, child. It's in homage. I term it Christopher's perpetual watch. The chamber motif is always remembered, never isolated. Patrick dragged his fingers through his locks, a motion so akin to his dad's that it briefly stirred my emotions. Mother, sleeping there is impossible. It's disturbing. Disturbing? Rubbish. I gestured away the notion. You adapt to the sensation of observation. I now find it rather calming. But if you'd rather, you might opt for the rear space I've occupied. It's compact, yet it holds merely one image of your dad. We're not lodging in that storage you label a sleeping area, Stephanie inserted resolutely. Patrick, we'll simply shift some of these images aside for now. My demeanor stayed amiable, but my words gained a faint sharpness. I advise against altering Christopher's remembrance setups. They're meticulously organized per the bereavement counselor's guidance. Altering them might activate my stress condition. What stress condition? Patrick questioned, confused. The one that arose following your dad's passing? I ad-libbed fluidly. Didn't I bring it up in our routine calls? Oh, hold on. You haven't rung in 90 days? It must have escaped me. Before Patrick could reply, Molly's shrill cry resounded from the adjacent sleeping area. Mother, something's stirring beneath the mattress. We all hurried to the space assigned for the youngsters, where Molly balanced on a seat, gesturing wildly at the ground. Oh, that's merely Mr. Antenna? I clarified brightly. You acquired a feline? Patrick inquired. Not precisely. I bent and produced a gentle snapping noise. Gradually, a massive land crab akin to a modest platter crept from under the bed, its feelers swaying inquisitively. That's no ordinary land crab, Stephanie inhaled, retreating and tugging Molly along. He's a palm climber, I elaborated. Entirely permissible as companions in this region with the appropriate unusual pet license. They're rather clever, similar to owning a canine, but they scale surfaces and unlock entrances. They're largely active at night, so he'll stir more during your slumber. Cool, Drake declared, briefly captivated beyond his display. They're utterly safe, I proceeded. Unless provoked. Their claws can split tropical nuts, thus the title. Avoid abrupt actions near him. Harold, who'd been inspecting the connected washroom, reappeared with a worried look. Meredith, there appears to be a problem with the commode here. Oh, certainly, the pipes in this area are somewhat finicky. You must pull the handle double, then tally to 17 prior to operating the basin, else the conduits emit this awful wailing. Also, don't fret if the flow turns murky now and then. The review document states it's harmless, merely unattractive. Stephanie's lips tightened. And the main washroom? Does it have finicky pipes too? No, indeed. I reassured her. That facility operates flawlessly. Although, I ought to note the bathing unit has a minor wiring glitch. Nothing hazardous. You merely experience a slight buzz when contacting the handles. The wiring expert claims its intolerable limits. Patrick drew me aside into the corridor, softening his voice. Mother, what's the issue? None of these flaws existed during our holiday stop. I fluttered my lashes guilelessly. Well, coastal dwellings demand ongoing upkeep, sweetheart. Elements degrade swiftly in the salty atmosphere. I meant to fix all this season, but then you declared your prolonged sojourn, so I delayed the fixes. I didn't wish to bother you with technicians entering and exiting. What about the extra sleeping area for Stephanie's mom and dad? Patrick queried, evidently seeking improved updates. Come with me. I directed the progressively quiet assembly to the extra sleeping area, which seemed ordinary initially. A nice space with pair beds and seaside adornments. This appears acceptable, Evelyn stated warily, as though anticipating a snag. It's the most silent spot in the dwelling, I verified. Save for from 3 o'clock before dawn to 6 o'clock before dawn when the mist signal blares. What mist signal? Harold questioned. We're distant from a beacon. Oh, it's not an actual mist signal. It's Jorge nearby. He's a former music educator who battles sleeplessness. He rehearses woodwind in those periods. He's skilled, though still refining his mouthpiece technique. The partitions here are exceptionally slim. As though timed, a jarring woodwind tone blasted from Jorge's side, startling all. He was merely preparing, I clarified. Await until he truly dives in. Patrick's veneer of command was evidently fracturing. Mother, is there more we need to learn about the residents? Let me ponder. I patted my jaw reflectively. The cooking area is fully operational, though the cooler entrance requires bracing closed with a seat overnight. The internet connects sporadically, stronger under lunar fullness, oddly. Oh, and I must note the regional fauna. Fauna, Stephanie restated faintly. No cause for concern. The opossum clan in the upper loft is highly mindful of limits. The shore birds only swoop at folks in scarlet, so I'd steer clear of that shade, Stephanie. I saw your bathing attire is ruby. I joined my palms eagerly. Now, who's famished? I've assembled a unique reception feast. It's Christopher's top dish. Medusa bake with kelp trim. The shared expression of dread on their visages nearly caused me to drop my facade, but decades of maintaining composure amid Patrick's youthful outbursts had equipped me nicely. Naturally, if that doesn't suit, there's a fine marine eatery nearby. Rather costly, but I'm confident Patrick won't object to covering for all after your lengthy travel. That seems far superior, Patrick stated swiftly. We'll dine out and reassess. As they swiftly withdrew to confer their choices in low, pressing whispers by the entry, I permitted myself a minor, personal grin. Christopher would have been chuckling heartily at this point, his frame quaking with quiet glee as he strove not to reveal our scheme. I could merely sense him nearby, murmuring, "That's my Meredith. You've retained your spark, darling." The season had merely commenced, and I had numerous additional reception astonishments prepared for my presumptuous offspring and his kin. Once Patrick's sport utility vehicle departed the drive for their meal getaway, I was already internally outlining the follow-up stage of Project Reclaim Sanctuary. Time to start near 11 at night, approximately when they'd be preparing for rest. Supper solo in my tranquil abode was a pleasure. I relished a flawlessly seared salmon portion on my veranda rocker, viewing the sundown tint the sea in hues of rose and amber. My cell phone had vibrated doubly, initially with a note from Amelia. Scheme in motion. Update me. Then with a communication from Jorge. Woodwind prepared and set for the late-night recital. Begin with drills or jump to improvisational tunes. I answered both, then verified the hour. Per my estimates, Patrick and his party would return from supper shortly, fatigued from the journey and anticipating sound slumber before addressing the dwelling's flaws the next day. They'd face letdown. At 9:45 in the evening, beams from headlights crossed my main room as their leased sport utility vehicle entered the drive. I promptly eased into Christopher's lounger with a picture collection on my knees, assuming the melancholic look of a mourning partner immersed in recollections. Patrick came in ahead, his face trapped between annoyance and worry. "Mother, we must discuss you've returned." I interjected, patting my eyes with a cloth. "I was merely browsing these aged snapshots of your dad. Were you aware he preserved every paternal celebration greeting you crafted? Even the third-year one with the pasta that detached. He claimed the intention still mattered." Patrick's irritation clearly lessened, supplanted by the uneasy discomfort he invariably showed when faced with true sentiment. "That's pleasant, Mother, but we truly need to address the dwelling circumstances." The remaining kin entered, appearing far less eager than upon arrival. Drake remained fixed his entertainment unit, though the power gauge blinked crimson. Molly lagged after her mom, complaining of fatigue. Stephanie's mom and dad upheld their golf club poise, but the fatigue showed near their gazes. "What was your opinion of Anchor Eats?" I questioned cheerfully, alluding to the sole marine diner in the area famed for its steep costs and average cuisine. "Did you sample the prawn dish? It's their highlight, though I've caught wind of sporadic gripes about stomach upset." "Nothing grave. It was okay," Patrick answered curtly. "Mother, regarding the rest setups." "Oh, that jogs my memory," I inserted, glancing at my timepiece. "It's nearly the moment for the evening irrigators." I should have noted them sooner. "Evening irrigators?" Stephanie repeated. Yes, for the unique after-dark flora in the yard. They demand hydration solely under moonlight. Related to celestial sustenance. The setup activates bi-hourly from 10 o'clock at night till sunrise. The command board is rather picky, so I've adapted to it. Can't you deactivate them? Stephanie inquired. I wouldn't suggest it. The previous attempt caused a total power failure in the residence. Required 72 hours to restore. I shook my head seriously. The delights of contemporary intelligent abodes. As though timed, a motorized hum initiated outdoors, trailed by the clear noise of liquids striking glass. That's peculiar. I furrowed my brow. They appeared directed at the dwelling this evening instead of the flora. Must be the ocean wind altering their path. Stephanie approached the pane, her face souring as she viewed liquids splashing the glass. Those irrigators are intentionally aimed at the residents. Are they? I looked past her arm with feigned astonishment. How odd. The yard specialist did reference the setup gaining independence. Evidently, it's frequent with this version. Harold coughed. Maybe we should all retire. It's been an extended day. Splendid suggestion, I concurred. Oh, prior to overlooking, I retrieved a bundle of documents from alongside my seat. Here's the residence detail folder. Crisis contacts, area sites, and crucially, the Residence Oddities Guide. Patrick took the documents tiredly. Residence Oddities Guide. Merely a handful of peculiarities you'll want awareness of, I detailed. For example, avoid running the wave oven and bread warmer together unless you fancy resetting the power switch in the underfloor access. The overhead rotator in the main sleeping area sometimes releases tiny fasteners, so I suggest protective cranial gear overnight. And no matter what, avoid operating any commodes amid a phone discussion. It generates a type of signal disruption that broadcasts highly intimate talks via the nearby harbor's announcement setup. They gazed at me in unified skepticism. Additionally, I went on eagerly, the regional opossum clan I referenced usually enters the upper loft near midnight. They're rather thoughtful, though they occasionally let nuts fall through the overhead openings. No issue unless you're positioned directly below an opening, then head protection is wise. Head protection for dropping nuts. Evelyn's impeccably groomed fingers gripped her bead strand. Well, filberts can pack surprising weight when released from loft elevation, I expounded seriously. Christopher once suffered a fairly bad mark. I store safety caps in each sleeping area's storage just for contingencies. Molly, who'd been semi-drowsy against her mom, abruptly alerted. I don't want nut impacts. Father, I'm frightened. No reason for fear, darling. Patrick comforted her, directing me a disapproving glance. Grandmother is merely overstating. Naturally, sweetheart. I beamed kindly. I'm certain all will be okay. The possums haven't released anything bigger than a pecan in weeks. Drake at last glanced up from his unit. My power's depleted. Where to recharge? There's a socket in your space, I answered. Though I must note the power flows in this abode are a tad erratic. Christopher speculated we're atop some magnetic irregularity. Gadgets sometimes reboot independently. Timekeepers seldom function. And information occasionally vanishes from units without alert. Drake's gaze widened in terror. Vanishes like preserved game advancement amid other items. But I'm sure it won't affect your unit. I tapped his arm comfortingly. Likely. Stephanie, who'd been reviewing the residence detail folder with growing concern, lifted her head abruptly. Meredith, this indicates the heat tank supplies only 20 minutes of warm flow, trailed by a 4-hour recharge. Yes, a regrettable constraint of coastal properties here. I inclined my head gravely. That's why I've crafted a kin bathing timetable. I indicated a diagram on the cooler. As visible, the initial warm flow chance starts at 5:30 before dawn with 3-minute allocations per individual. 3 minutes? Stephanie appeared stunned. That's insufficient for treating my locks. You acclimate, I comforted her. I discovered chanting the celebration tune doubly while cleansing aids timing. Naturally, if you skip your allocation, you'll await until 10:30 before noon for the subsequent warm cycle. Patrick's strained grin had morphed into a full skull. Mother, when did you plan to tackle these dwelling flaws? Oh, sometime, I motioned dismissively. Likely in autumn when providers give reduced rates off-peak. Unless you'd prefer to manage it. Christopher always claimed you shared his talent for residence enhancements. Before Patrick could answer, a massive, clashing eruption of woodwind melody burst from Jorge's abode, so intense it appeared to rattle the panes. Drake released his entertainment unit in surprise, and Molly pressed her palms over her hearing. That's simply Jorge bidding good evening, I expounded above the noise. He typically performs for roughly 20 minutes prior to his initial rest phase, then anew near 3 o'clock before dawn. He's refining his take on a jazz legend, though I personally feel it resembles a sea mammal in labor. As the woodwind howled through what could charitably be deemed experimentation, I rose and extended my limbs. Well, I believe I'll retire. My space might be tiny, but it's the most distant from Jorge's abode, so I scarcely detect him with my ambient sound device operating. Rest soundly, all. I proceeded to the rear space, then pivoted as if recalling an item. Oh, I nearly omitted noting the apparition. 6 sets of eyes fixed on me. Apparition? Patrick echoed faintly. Well, apparition could be an overstatement. Unaccounted evening occurrences is likely more precise. Prior proprietors referenced a sorrowful submergence in the 50s. No worry. The murmuring generally ceases before daybreak. With that final offering, I withdrew to my humble rear space, secured the entrance, and pressed my face into a cushion to stifle my chuckles. Through the slender partitions, I could discern the pressing, muted dialogue erupting among my undesired lodgers. This is mad, Stephanie's words carried distinctly. Your mom has gone unhinged. She's merely adapting to existence without father, Patrick protested feebly. Well, I'm not remaining in a space with falling fasteners, possums, and apparitions, Molly sobbed. Outdoors, the irrigators persisted in their steady assault on the panes, joined by Jorge's zealous woodwind performance. Meanwhile, in my snug rear space, fitted with superior noise blocking I'd added weeks prior, I dispatched a brief status note to Amelia. Initial stage done, subjects rattled, initiating project Late Night Harmony. Christopher would feel such pride. I awoke at 5 o'clock before dawn as I had daily since Christopher's departure. There's a purifying quality to sunrise by the shore. The mild illumination, the soft splashing of surf, the vow of opportunities. This dawn, though, held added delight as I silently readied for the subsequent stage of Project Reclaim Sanctuary. First, I deactivated the warm flow regulator I'd fitted the day before. There was actually ample warm flow for all, aware my rest-deprived lodgers would soon crave rinses. Then I advanced to the cooking area to commence what would seem a reconciling morning meal, my method of compensating for the tough evening they'd surely endured. Per the sequence of delighted messages Jorge had transmitted overnight, he had delivered 3 distinct performances at 11 o'clock at night, 1:30 before dawn, and 4 o'clock before dawn, each showcasing progressively adventurous woodwind methods. Amid these melodic breaks, my preset irrigator setup had triggered hourly, paired with pre-recorded scraping and pounding I'd placed in the upper loft. For the main suite, I'd organized unique features that would engage between 2 and 3 o'clock before dawn, understated yet unsettling. The electronic image holder on the bedside would momentarily display an enlargement of Christopher's gaze, while a compact audio unit concealed behind the bed frame would utter, "I'm observing you," at irregular times. The overhead rotator was rigged to activate on its minimal setting unannounced, causing the cardboard likeness of Christopher to appear animated in the faint glow. As I beat eggs for an omelet bake, I detected the clear sound of the main washroom rinse initiating, followed nearly instantly by a yelp and a series of oaths from Patrick. Precisely as planned, the rinse heat controller I'd installed functioned ideally, switching between icy and burning at haphazard moments. By 7:30 before noon, the aroma of brew, cured meat, and newly baked rolls had permeated the cooking area. I sang softly as I organized all on the meal surface, the image of matronly generosity. Patrick appeared first, shadows beneath his eyes and his tresses still moist from his rinse ordeal. "Good day, sweetheart," I trilled. "Did you rest soundly?" The stare he directed could have soured dairy. "Mother, we must converse about last evening's events." "Oh." I fluttered innocently. Was Jorge's melody overly loud? I did caution you. He's deeply committed to his woodwind. It wasn't solely the melody, Patrick started, his words taut with controlled aggravation. The irrigators kept striking our panes throughout the dark hours. Something was absolutely shifting in the upper loft. The rinse heat varied so wildly I almost burned. And Stephanie insists the gazes in father's images were tracking her. Tracking her. I placed a palm on my torso in amplified worry. Oh dear. That's precisely what the former owners recounted before vacating. They dubbed it Christopher's event, even though this predated my purchase by years. Isn't that an extraordinary overlap? Patrick's lid fluttered mildly. Mother, no such thing as there's an item in my washroom. Molly's sharp scream halted whatever Patrick intended to state. We dashed to the youngster's washroom where Molly balanced on the commode base, gesturing wildly at the tub. I stated calmly upon viewing the source of her alarm. That's simply Gertrude. Gertrude? Patrick repeated weakly. My companion shore crawler. She must have slipped her enclosure again. She favors concealing in the outlet. I believe she finds the dampness comforting. The sizable crawler, almost platter-sized, snapped its claws threateningly from the tub outlet. You maintain a huge crawler as a companion? Patrick's tone had climbed a note. She's not huge. She's merely thriving. I corrected him. The animal doctor claims she's the biggest example he's encountered. Her type is usually quite diminutive, but Gertrude has flourished on a unique regimen I devised. What do you provide her? Drake questioned, now engaged despite reservations. Oh, bits of various things, I responded vaguely. She's especially keen on colored toe coverings, though. Something in the varnish compounds. That's why I constantly don foot coverings indoors. Molly, still balanced unsteadily on the commode, emitted another cry. I'm not rinsing with that creature present. She's fully safe, I comforted her. Unless you perform quick motions or don anything shiny, she's oddly drawn to sparkle. I observed with contentment that both Molly's sleepwear and her preferred hair tie boasted ample sparkle decorations. By now, Stephanie and her folks had joined the expanding washroom viewers, all staring in dread at Gertrude, who had now fully exited the outlet and was surveying the tub with systematic resolve. This is intolerable, Stephanie proclaimed, drawing Molly's shielding behind her. Patrick, we must review other setups right away. Oh, but I've assembled morning meal, I objected, motioning to the cooking area. Come, let's consume while warm. I can reposition Gertrude afterward. Hesitantly, they trailed me back to the meal zone, where the array did appear truly appealing. Appetite overcame caution, and soon all were warily helping themselves. These rolls are really rather tasty, Harold remarked, appearing astonished. Christopher's formula, I detailed, serving brew to all. He excelled at baking. These specific rolls were his expertise. Ocean salt and sea vegetation with a dash of regional grit for consistency. Harold's mastication decelerated sharply. Grit? Just a smidgen, I comforted him. For true coastal essence, it's entirely consumable. Most folks ingest multiple pounds of grit over life unknowingly. Stephanie quietly expelled her morsel into a cloth, while Evelyn merely placed her roll aside, hunger clearly reduced. Mother, there's no grit in these rolls, Patrick exhaled, having consumed a sizable portion himself. Isn't there? I questioned guilelessly. I was certain I included it. Maybe it was the insect meal instead. Insect meal? Stephanie echoed, her complexion fading. For nutrients? I inclined eagerly. It's highly nourishing, and the bugs are scarcely detectable once pulverized. I've been testing eco-friendly recipes since your dad departed. Did you realize ground larvae offer more nutrients per unit than cattle? Drake, who'd been avidly consuming the egg dish, abruptly paused mid-bite. The egg dish lacks bugs, I comforted him. That's prepared with standard ova, and the dubious dark flecks are merely mushroom, not crawlers. I wasn't concerned about crawlers, Drake grumbled. Good, since those aren't in the egg dish. They're sugared as a garnish for the layered dairy treats. Very upscale. Nobody extended for the treats. Mother, Patrick stated cautiously, placing his brew vessel down. I believe we must tackle some matters about the residence. There are evidently problems needing resolution before it's fit for visitors. Oh, I patted my mouth with a cloth. Like what? Like the inconsistent pipes, the wiring flaws, the creatures? He enumerated, glancing to the washroom where Gertrude stayed loose. Not mentioning the irrigator setup that seems designed to aim pains specifically. Yes, the abode does possess its peculiarities, I concurred. That's why I was so astonished when you proclaimed your 3-month stay without inquiring if it fit. I aim to resolve these this season, but with 7 residents, repairs would be awfully interrupting. Patrick and Stephanie shared meaningful stares. Maybe, Stephanie proposed with strained courtesy. We ought to explore other lodgings for all's ease. Other lodgings? I restated, permitting a touch of injury to tint my words. But I've arranged all for your sojourn. I even surrendered my sleeping area, though I confess the rear space has endeared itself. It's rather snug, and proximity to the cleaning zone places me farthest from Jorge's woodwind performances. There's a fine lodge roughly 20 minutes along the shore, Evelyn inserted, evidently spotting an exit. Maybe we could check their openings. The Ocean Wind Lodge? I perked up. What a fine notion. They boast superior facilities, though I must caution, it's quite pricey in peak time, but I'm sure that's no issue for you folks. Patrick fidgeted restlessly. I knew well that 90 days at the Ocean Wind would demand a hefty sum, particularly for 7. We'll explore choices, he stated vaguely. Naturally, sweetheart. Whatever you deem optimal. I stood to gather the scarcely sampled morning dishes. Oh, I nearly omitted. The pest controller arrives this afternoon to handle the stinging insect matter in the visitors' sleeping areas. He advised avoiding rest there for at least 48 hours post-treatment. The nerve agents in the mist can induce curious visions in people. Stinging insects? Molly yelped. Just a minor group that's settled in the barrier voids, I described nonchalantly. No concern unless they penetrate the paneling, which solely occurs when they detect anxiety or sense tremors from heavy breathing. Does anyone here breathe heavily? As my stunned lodgers shared worried stares, my cell phone sounded with a message. I viewed it and furrowed dramatically. Oh no, that's the Sea Creature Recovery Hub. It appears today is my assistant's turn, and they have 3 fresh-harmed shorebirds needing attention. I totally overlooked. You assist with shorebirds? Stephanie questioned doubtfully. Oh yes, it's very fulfilling, though they do incline to bond with their tenders, which is why a group of them trails me home at times. They generally perch on the top, but sometimes enter via the smoke vent. I verified my timepiece. I should return by supper. Feel welcome to tour the locale while absent. As I collected my bag and headed for the exit, I couldn't resist a final offering. If the corridor washroom commode begins foaming, just weigh it with a thick volume. And no matter what, avoid responding to knocks if someone inquires about the historical excavation license. I'll manage that upon return. I departed them seated in shocked quiet at the meal surface. Gertrude's periodic snapping from the washroom offering ideal emphasis to their confusion. Once in my vehicle, I messaged Jorge. Morning phase finished. Launch Project Bird Brigade in 60 minutes. The reply arrived instantly. Understood. Grain bits and pre-recorded bird cries prepared for action. This was proving the most amusing season I'd enjoyed in ages. I passed the morning at the modest eatery in the locale savoring a true morning meal. Offspring's imagined bug flower and catching up with my real acquaintances. The proprietor, Maggie, had acquainted Christopher and me for years and was an eager partner in my protective effort. So, they simply declared themselves for the whole season and pushed you to the small room, she questioned, topping my brew cup. That lad of yours always possessed an air of privilege. Christopher pampered him, I conceded. And I supported it by never holding firm. But no longer. So, what's your following step? Maggie inclined close conspiratorially. I'm permitting them to simmer for several hours, I detailed. Jorge has organized for a grain transport to unintentionally scatter multiple sacks of fragments on my top near midday, followed by his remarkable assortment of pre-recorded shorebird noises at full blast. Maggie's chuckles attracted inquisitive looks from fellow patrons. Meredith Collins, who suspected you harbored such a cunning side? Christopher would be roaring with mirth. He forever valued a solid practical gag. I concurred, sensing a known twinge of absence eased by warm recall. Recall when he persuaded the full locale board that the shore was under assault by altered shore crabs? With those imitation casings he sculpted? I'd overlooked that. Maggie dabbed mirth tears from her gaze. Well, your mystery is secure with us. The entire locale supports you here. Near 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I resolved it was time to verify on my residence visitors. As I entered my drive, I was met by the splendid view of at least 30 shore birds orbiting my top, plunging sporadically toward the dispersed grain bits, while Jorge's top-tier audio units broadcast convincing shore bird assault shrieks. The lease sport utility vehicle was absent, indicating Patrick and his group had escaped the location. Ideal. This would provide time for the subsequent phase of setups. Indoors, the abode displayed marks of rapid exit, partially drained brew vessels, a youngster's garment over a seat, Stephanie's high-end shades overlooked on the ledge. I dispatched a swift note to Jorge appreciating his superb shore bird audio, then began labor. The main sleeping area required renewal after the prior evening's spectral. I swapped the Christopher figure with a fresh addition, this one with movable limbs that could be set in varied stances. I included multiple additional frame snapshots, strategically locating them so they appeared to survey the mattress from all directions. The highlight was a tiny motion-triggered audio unit hidden in the air duct that would emit Christopher's distinctive signal whenever someone passed. In the youngster's space, I freed 6 safe but strikingly large land crabs I'd loaned from my acquaintance at the Sea Hub. Each sported a minuscule shiny ribbon on its casing, rendering them especially appealing to a 10-year-old girl fond of glittering items. I set their enclosure to unlock automatically near midnight. For Stephanie's folks' space, I adopted a more understated tactic. I merely tweaked their mattress to possess a hardly noticeable slant, sufficient to cause them to feel mildly unbalanced overnight without pinpointing the cause. I also exchanged their standard cushions with ones that would gradually lose air through the dark hours. The shared zones got particular care, too. I distributed several lifelike faux bugs in key spots beneath the brew maker, in the plate storage, amid the cloths. I replaced the standard illuminators with ones that would slowly fade and brighten at haphazard times. And I readied a unique return astonishment involving the cooling setup and a container of my strongest scent oil reminiscent of receding tide. By 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I was prepared for their comeback. I eased into Christopher's seat with stitching tools and an unrecognizable task that was basically a knot of thread assuming the guise of a benign senior lady pursuing a charming pastime. The noise of wheels on pebbles signaled their arrival. I heard vehicle entrances closing, followed by Patrick's words issuing directives in a manner that implied he was trying to muster forces for conflict. The entry opened and my offspring entered ahead, his face resolute. "Mother, we must converse," he declared, the rest of his kin entering after, appearing tanned and disheveled. "Oh, you've returned," I exclaimed with feigned joy. "How was your excursion? Did you tour the beacon? The leader there is outstanding, though he does incline to emphasize heavily the calamity of 1879, all those unfortunate individuals vanished at sea. Some claim you can still detect their whales during lunar fullness." "We skipped the beacon," Patrick stated firmly. "We've been reviewing the circumstances and we've reached a conclusion." "A conclusion? How thrilling." I persisted, stitching my baffling thread creation. "I've reached one too. Seafood broth for supper. Christopher's unique formula." He used to claim the key element was endurance, but confidentially, its actually aged shrimp mixture creates quite a genuine fragrance. Stephanie advanced, her meticulously upheld poise visibly taxed. "Meredith, while we value your generosity, we've resolved to seek other setups for our time." "Other setups?" I restated, permitting a trace of letdown to shade my words. "We've reserved spaces at the Ocean Wind Lodge," Patrick detailed, evidently preparing for my response. "Just for 7 days initially. The abode is evidently not in the state we anticipated." I placed my stitching aside and offered my best injured look. "Is this due to Gertrude? I've moved her to the outdoor tube container. Or is it the apparition?" I discovered that setting out a modest glass of spirit overnight truly aids in soothing Christopher's essence. Patrick and Stephanie shared glances, clearly attempting to ascertain if I truly thought my departed spouse was spectral in the abode. "It's not a single matter, Mother," Patrick stated cautiously. "The abode requires maintenance, substantial maintenance, before it's appropriate for a prolonged kin sojourn." "I understand," I uttered gently, gazing at my palms. "And when do you plan to depart?" "This dusk," Stephanie replied, unable to completely conceal her ease. "We've already gathered most items." So promptly. "But I haven't even had opportunity to demonstrate to the youngsters how to nourish the winged mammal group in the upper loft," I mourned. "They're especially lively now owing to breeding time." Molly's gaze expanded in dread. "Winged mammals? There are winged mammals? Just a minor group?" I comforted her. "Fully safe fruit feeders, though they do incline to snag in lengthy trusses." I glanced pointedly at Molly's braid. "Nothing a solid set of cutters can't resolve if one lodges." "We'll depart in half an hour," Stephanie declared resolutely, placing shielding palms on Molly's arms. "Youngsters, complete gathering your items. Harold, Evelyn, can you assist with the bags?" As the kin dispersed to assemble their possessions, Patrick remained, examining me with a blend of frustration and emerging doubt. "Mother, is there something occurring that I need awareness of?" he questioned. "The abode wasn't this way at holiday time. And you've never referenced a companion crawler or winged mammals or spectral spirits before." I fluttered guilelessly. "Heavens, Patrick, what are you implying? That I've purposefully rendered my home unwelcoming to repel my own kin? What sort of parent would engage in that?" "I didn't claim after all," I proceeded, my words quivering mildly for impact. "It's not as though you proclaimed your intentions to seize my seaside home for 90 days without inquiry, or notified me I'd be pushed to the helpers area while you and Stephanie claimed the main suite that I adorned with such attention after your dad's passing. No offspring would be that thoughtless to his bereaved parent." Patrick had the decency to appear uneasy. "When phrased thus, it does seem arrogant." "Does it?" I questioned softly. I hadn't observed. We locked eyes for an extended instant. A quiet contest of resolve. "For maybe the initial occasion since adolescence," Patrick averted first. "The lodge has a pair-bedroom unit open next 7 days," he eventually stated. "It has a connected solo space that would suit you if you'd care to accompany us there. We'd handle the expense, naturally." I pondered this sudden peace offering. "That's quite considerate, Patrick. I'll ponder it." Within 60 minutes, they had reloaded their substantial bags into the leased sport utility vehicle. As they readied to leave, I handed a tiny bundle to Molly. "A small token to recall your time," I informed her. "Unwrap it once settled at the lodge." Patrick directed a doubtful glance, but Molly appeared truly moved by the act. As I signaled farewell from my entry veranda, observing their sport utility vehicle fade along the path, I couldn't resist speculating how soon they'd uncover the tiny, lifelike faux crawler I'd concealed in Molly's bundle, or the pre-recorded snapping noises that would sound when the container opened. I retrieved my cell phone to message Amelia. Objective achieved. Abode recovered swiftly. Your parent is a strategic mastermind. Jorge appeared at his entry pane and offered an approving gesture. I returned it with a triumph signal. That dusk, I shifted my items back to the main suite, eliminated the faux Christopher figure, and restored the space to its calm, standard condition. The washroom had plentiful warm flow. The rinse heat stayed perfectly steady, and no gazes observed me from the image holders. As I slipped into slumber in my proper mattress with the noise of actual breakers supplanting Jorge's shore-bird audio, I could nearly detect Christopher's soft chuckles and his words uttering, "That's my Meredith." You at last held firm. The dawn after my kin's rapid withdrawal brought a serenity so deep it seemed nearly tangible. I extended luxuriously in my recovered main bedroom, viewing the sun ascend tint the sea in tones of gold and orange. No woodwind performances, no irrigators hitting panes, no complaints from presumptuous kin members, just the mild cadence of surf and far-off shore birds, the authentic ones now. After a relaxed morning meal on my veranda, I started the job of normalizing the abode. The audio units were dismantled, the concealed gadgets gathered, Gertrude and her shelled companions were boxed for return to the sea hub, and Jorge aided me in resetting the irrigator setup to its correct yard hydration role. I nearly pity them, Jorge laughed as we readjusted the irrigators. Nearly, but not entirely. They'll be far happier at the ocean wind, I comforted him. Attendant service, daily tidying, no spectral signals or heat-shifting rinses. And you'll regain your refuge, he noted, examining my eased stance. You appear a decade fresher today, Meredith. I sense it, I conceded. For the initial occasion since Christopher departed, I defended myself. He would have felt pride, as though called by the kin reference. My cell phone rang. Amelia contacting from the Northwest City. Did it succeed? Are they departed? She demanded without introduction. Project Reclaim Sanctuary was a total victory, I affirmed, setting her on broadcast so Jorge could listen. They escaped to the Ocean Wind Lodge the prior dusk. You should have witnessed their expressions when the bird brigade arrived. Amelia's chuckles flowed through the device. I wish I'd witnessed. Did you employ all the tactics we covered? Most, I answered. The cardboard likeness of your stepdad was especially potent, particularly when matched with the motion-triggered signal. And how's Patrick handling it? Has he deduced your actions? I pondered this. He's doubtful, but hasn't outright charged me. He did suggest I accompany them at the lodge next 7 days when a linking space opens. Are you planning to? Amelia sounded astonished. I'm pondering it, I conceded. On my conditions this occasion, a stopover, not a takeover. See you establishing limits. Amelia's admiration was clear. Christopher would be performing a triumph jig. After concluding my discussion with Amelia and appreciating Jorge for his essential aid, I passed the afternoon normalizing my abode to its prior calm. By dusk, no remnant lingered of Project Reclaim Sanctuary beyond a few additional Christopher snapshots I chose to retain shown. They now brought grins, mementos of both my departed spouse and my recovered dignity. Just as I eased in with a volume and a vessel of vintage, my entry bell sounded. To my astonishment, Patrick stood on my veranda solo and appearing unusually modest. May I enter? He questioned. I retreated genuinely intrigued by this unforeseen stop. Certainly. Is all well at the lodge? It's adequate, he comforted me, entering cautiously as if anticipating a crawler to dash across his route. Cozy, handy, pricey, I proposed mildly. He flinched. Extremely, but that's not my purpose here. I guided him to the main room, noting how his gaze darted warily to edges and overheads, hunting for concealed dangers or monitoring. The abode appears altered, he noted. Does it? Less spectral. I grinned guilelessly. I've never deemed it spectral, just rich with recollections. Patrick eased uncomfortably on the couch, the identical one where he'd perched the day before scheming his getaway. Mother, I owe you remorse. This was unforeseen. In 42 years, I could tally on one palm the occasions Patrick had willingly expressed regret for anything. I'm attentive, I urged when he didn't promptly proceed. He dragged a palm through his locks, so akin to Christopher when uneasy. It was arrogant of me to presume we could dominate your abode for the season, and pushing you to the rear space was thoughtless. Yes, it was, I concurred, not easing it for him. It's merely that he paused. That's how it forever was. When Father lived, he would create room for whatever I required, and you would comply. I suppose I anticipated the identical yielding would persist. The portrayal startled me. Not merely that he identified the routine, but that he'd expressed it so distinctly. Your dad cherished you immensely, I uttered cautiously. At times that affection manifested as leniency. And yes, I facilitated it because I desired tranquility in the kin. But circumstances differ now, Patrick recognized. They do, I verified. I'm altered. Losing your dad transformed me, Patrick. I'm not merely a continuation of him or simply your parent. I'm an individual with my own desires and limits. He inclined slowly. I'm starting to recognize that, particularly after the peculiar events of the past day. A grin pulled at my mouth's edge. The abode does have its oddities. Remarkably targeted and specific oddities, Patrick noted dryly. Almost as if crafted to cause discomfort. What a fantasy you possess, I deflected. Next, you'll propose I train shore birds to strike on order or set the irrigators to aim solely visitor pains. The idea had occurred, he conceded, particularly after Molly unwrapped your token and almost caused the lodge attendant cardiac arrest with her cries. I struggled to maintain my look neutral. Oh dear, did she dislike the memento shell adornment? The faux crawler concealed within was an unforeseen addition. How negligent of the token store to include such, I stated with wide innocence. Patrick examined me for an extended instant, then astonished me with a true chuckle, a noise I hadn't heard from him in ages. You know, Father would have utterly adored this. He forever claimed you possessed a concealed, playful side that few valued. Your dad understood me well, I recognized, at last permitting my own grin to surface. So Patrick leaned ahead. Theoretically speaking, if someone were to thoughtlessly seize their parent's seaside abode and demote her to insufficient quarters, what might that parent theoretically do to recover her area? Theoretically, I feigned to ponder such a parent might discover ways to render her home less attractive to undesired, prolonged visitors. She might amplify certain bothers or maybe invent fresh ones. All theoretically, naturally. Naturally. Patrick concurred, his gaze wrinkling at the edges, just like Christopher's once did. And would these theoretical steps include schooled shelled creatures, faulty pipes, and the essence of her departed spouse? An inventive parent might utilize whatever assets she possessed, I answered neatly. Patrick shook his head in amazement. You know, Stephanie is persuaded you've suffered some mental lapse. Her folks are proposing senior assessment. How kind of them, I commented. And what do you believe? I believe, he uttered slowly, that I undervalued you. That maybe I've undervalued you for years. The admission lingered between us. Not quite regret, but something similarly precious. Acknowledgement. Your dad never undervalued me, I informed him gently. Even when he overpampered you, he forever viewed me distinctly. It was among the numerous reasons I adored him. Patrick inclined, a fresh comprehension in his gaze. He'd feel pride in you for holding firm, even if your approaches were unconventional. Speaking of unconventional approaches, I transitioned. How are the setups at the Ocean Wind? Cozy but confined? He conceded. We secured the final unit open, and it's notably smaller than required for 7. And notably costlier than imposing on your parent, I added. Notably, he concurred with a wince. We're examining some lease homes farther along the shore, but high season choices are scarce. I pondered this data, evaluating my options. The triumph of recovering my area had been delightful, but maybe there was space for a more refined outcome. I've been pondering your suggestion to accompany you at the lodge next 7 days, I uttered cautiously. I have a counter-suggestion. Patrick lifted a brow, appearing interested, but cautious. I'm attentive. You and your kin are welcome to come back here. I commenced lifting a palm to halt his instant reply under specific terms. First, I keep the main bedroom. Second, stops are capped at 14 days, not the full season. Third, Stephanie's folks secure other lodgings. The inn nearby is rather appealing. That's truly fair, Patrick conceded, appearing astonished. I'm a fair individual when regarded with esteem, I highlighted. Something your dad forever grasped. Patrick had the decency to appear embarrassed. And the peculiar home traits, the picky pipes, the wiring matters, the creatures mysteriously fixed, I comforted him with a calm grin. Though Gertrude may stop by now and then, she's grown fond of the tub outlet. A look of true alarm crossed his face. Gertrude exists. Naturally she exists, I answered, savoring his unease. Though substantially tinier than the one you encountered. About the scale of a large coin rather than a platter. Relief flooded his features, followed by another chuckle, more true this occasion, less reserved. You truly are remarkable, Mother. Father forever claimed you were the foundation of the kin, but I never completely grasped his meaning until now. As Patrick departed with my counter-suggestion to review with his kin, I sensed a balance I hadn't known since Christopher's departure. Not merely the contentment of a victorious protection, but something profounder. The awareness that I had at last stepped completely into my own essence, beyond partner and parent. That dusk, as I perched on my veranda rocker, observing the lunar glow dance over the breakers, I could nearly detect Christopher adjacent, his arm against mine, as it had been innumerable dusks prior. You were correct, I informed the vacant spot beside me. I did possess the strength to hold firm. It just required losing you to uncover that power. A warm gust swept the veranda, bearing the briny ocean aroma and maybe just the slightest resonance of Christopher's chuckles. 3 days post Patrick's unforeseen stop, my cell phone rang with a contact from the Ocean Wind Lodge. I responded with intentional nonchalance, though I'd anticipated this connection since offering my counter-suggestion. "Hello, Mother. It's Patrick. We've reviewed your suggestion." Oh, I maintained my tone even, resisting the impulse to note that they were now bargaining for entry to an abode they had formerly tried to seize. "We'd like to accept with a pair of adjustments," he proceeded, his commerce bargaining voice fully active. "We'd favor 21 days instead of 14, and we'd like to divide the period, 10 days presently, then a pause while we stop at Stephanie's relative in the mid-Atlantic state, then another 10 days in August." I pondered this revision. It was actually quite fair, superior to my initial offer, in truth, as it would grant me calm breaks between kin occupations. "That appears feasible," I yielded, provided the other terms stay intact. "I retain the main bedroom and Stephanie's folks secure other lodgings." Regarding that, Patrick paused. "Harold and Evelyn have already reserved the inn nearby for their time, but Evelyn is worried about separation from the grandkids. She proposed kin suppers each dusk." I curbed a grin at how swiftly Stephanie's strong-willed mom had modified her anticipations from full occupation to simply imposing routine supper stops. "Advancement kin suppers would be acceptable," I concurred, provided their joint efforts, not an extra burden for me. Naturally, Patrick comforted me promptly. "Stephanie and her mom are already organizing dishes they can assemble. Evidently, the small cooking spot in their lodge unit is quite restricting." "How considerate," I remarked, careful to exclude any sarcasm from my words. "When would you like to return?" "Tomorrow, if that suits the lodges." "Well, the cost is substantial." "Tomorrow is fine," I informed him. "Already the spaces." "The actual spaces," I added meaningfully. "Not the spectral editions." There was a pause. Then Patrick posed the query he'd evidently been restraining. "Mother, was anything in that abode truly authentic?" "The pipe matters?" "The wiring problems, the creatures." "Define authentic," I countered. "You grasp my meaning," he urged. "Were there truly stinging insects in the barriers or winged mammals in the upper loft?" "Patrick," I answered neatly, "a lady must preserve some enigmas. Let's just state the abode will be substantially more cozy during your next sojourn." After settling the particulars of their comeback, I passed the day readying the visitors' spaces correctly. The youngster's space was fully de-shelled with new cloths and a modest container of true shore finds for Molly and Drake. The third space was likewise renewed with a subtle memo on the cabinet reminding occupants that Jorge rehearsed woodwind only on second and fourth days of the week at a fair level and for no more than half an hour. I retained my own accents in place. Naturally, my adornments, my choices, my understated reminders that this was my abode where they were invited visitors, not privileged residents. But there were no cardboard figures, no images gazing from overhead, no altered devices or strategically placed faux creatures. Well, perhaps one tiny faux crawler concealed in Drake's bedside storage. I wasn't emotionless after all. The subsequent afternoon, the lease sport utility vehicle once more materialized in my drive. This occasion, however, the kin that emerged was notably distinct from the privileged vacationers who had arrived anticipating to seize my abode for the season. Patrick neared the entry with a courteous tap rather than bursting in. Stephanie bore a sizable plant of greenery as a host token. The youngsters were restrained, surveying the abode with remaining doubt. Greetings again, I received them, opening the entrance wide. "I hope you deemed the ocean wind cozy, if costly." It was quite pleasant, Stephanie provided with cautious courtesy. "But we're anticipating more room here. Appreciate you receiving us, Meredith." The stiffness between us was nearly humorous, like formal ties being warily reestablished after a global event. "I've readied the azure and golden visitor spaces," I notified them. "Drake and Molly in the azure, you and Patrick in the golden. I presume Harold and Evelyn are arranged at the inn." "They register this afternoon," Stephanie verified. "They'll accompany us for supper at 6 o'clock if that fits." "I've brought provisions to assemble the meal." "That would be delightful," I concurred. "I'll assist, naturally." As they transported their bags to the visitor spaces, I noted their cautious motions, the way they inspected each area before fully entering, checking edges and outlets for unanticipated creatures. Molly declined to utilize the washroom until Patrick had performed a complete check and confirmed it was shelf-free. "The abode feels different," Stephanie remarked as she unpacked in the golden space, casting doubtful glances at the air ducts and light holders. "Does it?" I questioned guilelessly. "Perhaps it was merely adjusting during your last stop. Aged shore abodes can be picky." Patrick directed me a knowing glance, but uttered nothing, evidently resolving that pursuing the matter would not benefit him. By supper hour, a provisional fresh standard had been set. Stephanie and Evelyn assembled a truly remarkable meal in my cooking area, with Harold blending drinks and the youngsters arranging the surface without prompting. A small wonder I attributed to thorough guidance before their comeback. As we assembled around the meal surface, I could sense the change in kin interactions. No longer was I the assumed maternal figure expected to provide and yield without recognition. Instead, I was now, perhaps for the initial occasion in my connection with Patrick's kin, acknowledged as a figure with power and limits deserving esteem. "A salute," Harold suggested, elevating his vessel to Meredith for her kind reception and flexible household. A wave of anxious chuckles circled the surface as vessels touched. Even Stephanie achieved a true grin, though her gaze still darted sporadically to the overhead, as if anticipating a shower of Christopher snapshots or mechanical shore birds. "And to kin stops," I added, elevating my own vessel, "of suitable length and with shared regard." Patrick nearly gagged on his vintage, but recovered well. "To shared regard," he repeated, the intent clearly grasped. The supper dialogue proceeded more smoothly than I'd expected, with Drake hesitantly sharing particulars about a sea science course at the lodge that had seized his curiosity, and Molly depicting the shells she'd gathered along the coast. The underlying strain slowly lessened as it became evident that the abode was acting normally. No varying power, no enigmatic noises from the upper loft, no shelled creatures emerging from outlets. After sweet, as we shifted to the veranda to relish the sundown, Evelyn neared me with atypical reluctance. "Meredith," she commenced, her golf club poise mildly strained. "I sense I owe you remorse. It was arrogant of us to presume we could simply accompany the youngsters for the full season without proper welcome." The concession evidently cost her significant pride. Evelyn had forever positioned herself as the kin head, the expert on correct conduct and societal anticipations. For her to admit overstepping was novel. "We all possess oversights where kin is involved," I provided generously. "I've surely had mine through the years." "Yes, well," she inhaled, reverting somewhat to her usual manner. "The inn is rather appealing, though the cushions are lacking. Harold and I will be quite cozy there for our stop." Our stop, not the season. Advancement indeed. As the dusk concluded and my reorganized kin assembly dispersed, Harold and Evelyn to their inn, the youngsters to tour the shore before darkness fully descended. Stephanie to unpack the leftover bags. Patrick lingered on the veranda with me, observing the initial stars emerge over the sea. "You know," he uttered after a cozy quiet, "Father would have managed this circumstance differently." "How so?" I questioned, interested in his view. "He would have promptly yielded the main bedroom, shifted to the rear space without gripe, and passed the season intervening between you and Stephanie while feigning all was fine." I inclined, acknowledging the accuracy in this evaluation. "Your dad was a harmonizer, sometimes at his own cost. But you discovered another path," Patrick noted. "Less yielding, more inventive." I favor viewing it as educational rather than merely inventive. I amended him. "Some teachings demand striking examples to be fully grasped." A true chuckle escaped him. The second I'd detected in our recent exchanges, a noise evocative of the lad he'd been before grown-up drive and privilege had reshaped him. Intent grasped. "Mother," he comforted me distinctly. "No further presumptions about your abode, your area, or your readiness to be bothered." As Patrick joined his kin on the shore, I stayed on the veranda, relishing the unforeseen contentment of this fresh balance. The initial week of my kin's renegotiated sojourn progressed with astonishing ease. Patrick and Stephanie upheld a purposeful courtesy that, while mildly stiff, signified a huge enhancement over their prior privileged manner. The youngsters slowly unwound as no additional shelled encounters occurred, though Drake persisted in inspecting beneath his mattress nightly, a measure that secretly amused me. Harold and Evelyn appeared on time each dusk for supper, bearing vintage or sweet and leaving by 9, honoring limits that would have been inconceivable in their original season takeover scheme. Even Stephanie's inclination to rearrange my cooking items had been limited, replaced by cautious requests whenever she needed an item. "It's nearly unsettling," I shared with Jorge during our dawn brew on my veranda, 6 days into their sojourn. "All are acting so thoughtful." "The influence of tactical spectral," he laughed. "Nothing fosters esteem like a few strategically placed essence murmurs and picky devices." "I keep anticipating reversion to type," I conceded. "For Patrick to issue commands, or Stephanie to judge my adornments." "Allow them moments," Jorge counseled wisely. "Old patterns fade slowly, but fresh ones can develop with appropriate incentive, and you supplied highly effective incentive." That afternoon, as I returned from my balance exercise session on the shore, I discovered Patrick solo in the abode working on his portable computer at the meal surface. "Where are the others?" I questioned, setting my exercise pad. "Stephanie escorted the kids to some shell crafting session at the lodge," he answered, shutting his machine. "She believed it might benefit them to have an artistic release that doesn't include displays." I lifted a brow at this atypical parenting selection. Stephanie usually favored pursuits that captured well for online sharing rather than those with true learning worth. "That sounds marvelous," I remarked. And unlike her, Patrick grinned wryly. "She's been reflecting since our sudden exit and comeback." "We both have." "Oh." I kept my tone neutral, though I was truly interested. "Mother, can we converse?" Patrick motioned to the seat opposite. "Really converse without the formal sidestepping we've done all week." I eased into the designated seat, captivated by this unforeseen opening. "I'm attentive." Patrick dragged a palm through his locks. So like his dad when assembling tough ideas. "When father lived, he handled all the bond logistics in our kin. He was the cushion, the interpreter, the arbitrator." "He was," I concurred. "Your dad had a talent for easing sharp corners." After his departure, Patrick proceeded, "I think we all slipped into our set routines without him to modify the equilibrium. I anticipated the same yielding from you that father forever enabled." Stephanie presumed the order with her folks would persist unchallenged. The awareness in his evaluation astonished me. "That's quite perceptive, Patrick." "I've had moments to contemplate," he conceded, "especially after being expelled from your abode by what I now firmly doubt was a complex mental campaign worthy of armed forces strategy." I upheld an expression of courteous curiosity, neither affirming nor refuting. "The fact is," he proceeded, "I never truly viewed you separate from father. You were forever a pair in my thoughts, with him as the speaker and you as the backbone." The portrayal pricked mildly with its precision. I had indeed permitted Christopher to be our main-kin spokesperson, comfortable in the assisting role that suited me naturally. "That wasn't your dad's creation," I explained. "It was a pattern we both engaged in. Christopher was inherently sociable, and I favored working in the background. But that doesn't signify I lacked my own ideas and limits." I recognize that now, Patrick acknowledged quite distinctly. In fact, a moment of comprehension passed between us, parent and offspring, viewing each other more completely perhaps than we had in decades. "Stephanie and I have been discussing," he proceeded, "about how we've handled kin bonds, about the models we're establishing for Drake and Molly. We don't want them maturing with the same privilege problems." The concession was so unforeseen, I briefly struggled for a reply. "That's praiseworthy," I eventually managed. "It's essential," Patrick amended. Observing how Stephanie's folks engage the world, the constant anticipations of preferential handling, the failure to regard others' requirements, I'm beginning to identify those same routines in us and in the youngsters, especially Molly. I considered my granddaughter's usual conduct, the complaining demands, the anticipation of instant fulfillment, the challenge sharing focus or assets. "Molly does have quite solid anticipations," I recognized diplomatically. "She's a pampered child," Patrick declared frankly. And that's our fault. We've provided her all without demanding gratitude or thoughtfulness. Drake's following the same route, just more quietly with his face in a display. This degree of parental awareness was unprecedented from my offspring and his spouse, who usually protected their youngsters' actions as lively or determined rather than admitting any troublesome routines. What prompted this insight? I questioned, truly interested. Patrick's mouth curved with reluctant humor. Truthfully, witnessing Molly's total breakdown at the lodge when she found the faux crawler in your token. It wasn't just standard 10-year-old theatrics. It was a complete sentimental collapse over a small surprise. Stephanie and I realized we were viewing our future if we didn't alter direction. I experienced a pang of remorse about employing my granddaughter as a lesson object, swiftly followed by the contentment of knowing my tactical crawler placement had spurred some true kin reflection. Raising children is ongoing adjustment, I provided. Your dad and I surely committed our portion of errors. Like yielding to my every desire, Patrick proposed Riley, among others, I recognized with a minor grin. Though in our protection you were quite convincing even as a youth. You could argue for a fresh plaything or extended rest time with the accuracy of a legal advocate. A ability I've evidently transferred to Molly without the related teachings in moderation and thoughtfulness, he exhaled. Which leads to a request I'd like to make. Oh. Would you be open to passing some individual time with the youngsters during this stop? Not as the yielding grandparent, but as the lady who just coordinated a complex tactical spectral to educate her grown offspring about limits. I think they could gain from your outlook. The plea caught me entirely unprepared. Patrick and Stephanie had forever meticulously controlled my engagements with their youngsters, favoring short, closely monitored stops that preserved their parental control. This welcome to impact their growth signified a massive change in our kin pattern. I'd be delighted to, I uttered cautiously. What did you envision? Drake referenced the sea science course at the lodge. Patrick proposed. I know you assist at the protection hub. Perhaps you could escort him there. Demonstrate what you do. And Molly adores creativity. Maybe she'd relish your watercolor session. Those sound like superb beginnings, I concurred, trying not to display how moved I was by his consideration in linking my pursuits with the youngsters. Just one term, Patrick added, a trace of his former humor returning. No more surprise-shelled creatures, device or otherwise. I don't think Molly's nerves can manage another jolt. I'll limit to traditional grandparent pursuits, I vowed seriously, though I offer no assurances about what the Sea Hub assistants might display them. Jorge's grandson operates in the Interaction Basin Zone and has a specific affection for ocean veggies that expel protectively when touched. Patrick's chuckle, true and open, echoed his dad's so distinctly it briefly constricted my throat with recollection and absence. But the pain was milder now, softened by the expanding bond with the offspring across from me. A bond constructed not on yielding or duty, but on fresh shared esteem. A bond for which the most vital legacies aren't monetary at all. The subsequent dawn broke bright and clear, ideal for my intended trip with Drake to the Sea Protection Hub. To my astonishment, he was already alert when I entered the cooking area, seated at the surface with a dish of grains, and most startling, no digital unit visible. Dawn, grandparent, he mumbled around a bite of meal. Father said, we're viewing Odyssey items today. The Sea Protection Hub, I verified, pouring myself brew, where I assist twice weekly. They restore harmed ocean beings and inform guests about sea preservation. Drake's usual youthful apathy appeared mildly lessened. Do they possess predators? Multiple types in the healing basins, I informed him, including a young gentle predator that was snared in angling webs last month. You might even be permitted to aid with her nourishment if Marcus is on duty today. That seized his complete focus. For genuine? Like truly nourish a predator? Marcus is skilled at evaluating which guests can be relied on with such duties, I uttered cautiously. He seeks individuals who can adhere to directions exactly and stay composed around the beings. Drake straightened, a touch of resolve supplanting his typical slump. I can manage that. The change persisted as we traveled to the hub with Drake posing progressively detailed queries about ocean life and preservation initiatives. By arrival, he had discarded all pretense of teen disinterest, almost leaping with expectation as I registered us at the assistant counter. "Mrs. Collins, good to see you." Marcus received me with a cordial grin. "And you've brought in aid today." "My grandson Drake," I presented. "He's curious about your predator restoration course." Marcus examined Drake with the identical evaluating stare he gave all prospective assistants. "Ever dealt with ocean life before, Drake?" "No, sir," Drake answered. The sir evidently a trained addition from Patrick, but delivered with surprising earnestness. "But I'm fast to grasp and I'll follow all protection rules." Marcus's brows lifted mildly at the formal reply. "Well, then let's equip you both with assistant tags and commence with guidance." What ensued was one of the most striking changes I'd seen in my grandson. The lad, who usually couldn't concentrate on anything beyond a display for over 5 minutes, spent 3 hours in total immersion, gauging liquid quality factors, readying specialized nourishment for various types, and ultimately under Marcus' cautious oversight, aiding to nourish the young gentle predator. "She favors you," Marcus noted as the predator took food from the nourishment rod. Drake warily extended into the basin. "Mako here is generally wary of fresh folks." Drake's face shone with a pride I'd never witnessed before. Not the fabricated assurance of conquering a digital challenge, but the true contentment of gaining trust from a living being. "How frequently do you nourish her?" he questioned, carefully adhering to Marcus' directions to retract the nourishment rod. "Twice each day," Marcus answered. "We're understaffed on 4th days. If you're interested in a steady assistant role with your grandparent as overseer, naturally," he added with an inclination to me. Drake turned to me, eyes expanded, with an unvoiced query. "We're only here for another 7 days this." "Stop," I reminded him softly. "But we'll return for 10 days in August. Perhaps we could organize something then." "That would be fantastic," Drake exhaled, turning back to the predator basin with renewed intent. On the travel home, Drake was atypically talkative, depicting each facet of the encounter in detail and posing thoughtful queries about sea preservation. When I noted that several of the hub's courses were supported by contributions and assistant efforts, he grew quiet for a moment. "I receive a stipend," he uttered finally. "It's likely not sufficient to aid much, but maybe I could, I don't know, contribute some for Mako's nourishment or something." The proposal, so contrary to the possession-focused emphasis his parents had forever promoted, caught me by surprise. "That's very considerate, Drake," I informed him earnestly. "Even minor contributions matter when folks care enough to provide." He inclined, gazing out the pane thoughtfully. "Nobody at Learning cares about this material. It's all about possessing the latest communicator or the trendiest footwear. But that predator, she nearly perished because someone abandoned angling webs in the liquid. That seems far more vital than having the newest whatever." The perception from my 13-year-old grandson, formerly fixated on status items and display time, left me briefly wordless. "Your granddad would have concurred with you entirely," I eventually uttered. "He believed in discovering purpose beyond belongings." "Father says Granddad Chris was really astute about material like that," Drake answered. "He said he wishes he'd attended more to his guidance when younger." This glimpse into Patrick's private thoughts with his offspring touched me deeply. Perhaps my offspring was engaging in more soul examination than I'd realized. When we reached home, Drake promptly sought Patrick to share his encounter. His voice lively in a way I hadn't detected since he was much younger. "And grandparent knew all there." He wrapped up his rapid recounting. "She's like significant. They all sought her guidance about the sea reptiles and material." Patrick met my gaze over Drake's head, a look of astonished gratitude crossing his features. "I had no notion you were so engaged at the hub, Mother. There's quite a bit we don't know about each other." I observed mildly. "Perhaps that's shifting." The connection between us felt different now. Not the cautious difference of a child to parent or the entitled expectations of an adult son, but something closer to true adult kinship, rooted in mutual respect. A connection for which the most important inheritances aren't financial at all. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect for my planned excursion with Drake to the Marine Conservation Center. To my surprise, he was already awake when I entered the kitchen, sitting at the table with a bowl of cereal, and most shocking of all, no electronic device in sight. Morning, Grandma, he mumbled around a mouthful of breakfast. Dad said, we're going to see weird ocean stuff today. The Marine Conservation Center, I confirmed, pouring myself coffee. Where I volunteer 2 days a week. They rehabilitate injured sea creatures and educate visitors about ocean conservation. Drake's typical teenage indifference seemed slightly diminished. Do they have sharks? Several species in the recovery tanks, I told him, including a young nurse shark that was caught in fishing nets last month. You might even be allowed to help with her feeding if Marcus is working today. That caught his full attention. For real? Like actually feed a shark? Marcus is very good at assessing which visitors can be trusted with such responsibilities, I said carefully. He looks for people who can follow instructions precisely and remain calm around the animals. Drake sat up straighter, a hint of determination replacing his usual slouch. I can do that. The transformation continued as we drove to the center with Drake asking increasingly specific questions about marine life and conservation efforts. By the time we arrived, he had abandoned all pretense of adolescent disinterest, practically bouncing with anticipation as I signed us in at the volunteer desk. Mrs. Collins, welcome back. Marcus greeted me with a warm smile. And you've brought a helper today. My grandson Drake, I introduced. He's interested in your shark rehabilitation program. Marcus studied Drake with the same assessing look he gave all potential volunteers. Ever worked with marine life before, Drake? No, sir, Drake replied. The sir clearly a coached addition from Patrick, but delivered with surprising sincerity. But I'm a quick learner and I'll follow all safety protocols. Marcus's eyebrows rose slightly at the formal response. Well, then let's get you both some volunteer badges and start with orientation. What followed was one of the most remarkable transformations I'd witnessed in my grandson. The boy who typically couldn't focus on anything beyond a screen for more than 5 minutes spent 3 hours in complete absorption, measuring water quality parameters, preparing specialized feed for different species, and ultimately under Marcus' careful supervision, helping to feed the juvenile nurse shark. She likes you, Marcus observed as the shark accepted food from the feeding stick Drake cautiously extended. Into the tank. Mako here is usually suspicious of new people. Drake's face glowed with a pride I'd never seen before. Not the artificial confidence of beating a video game level, but the genuine satisfaction of earning trust from a living creature. How often do you guys feed her? He asked, carefully following Marcus' instructions to withdraw the feeding stick. Twice daily, Marcus replied. We're short-staffed on Thursdays. If you're interested in a regular volunteer position with your grandmother as supervisor, of course, he added with a nod to me. Drake turned to me, eyes wide with an unspoken question. We're only here for another week this visit, I reminded him gently. But we'll be back for 10 days in August. Perhaps we could arrange something then. That would be awesome, Drake breathed, turning back to the shark tank with newfound purpose. On the drive home, Drake was uncharacteristically communicative, describing each aspect of the experience in detail and asking thoughtful questions about marine conservation. When I mentioned that several of the center's programs were funded by donations and volunteer efforts, he fell silent for a moment. I get an allowance, he said finally. It's probably not enough to help much, but maybe I could, I don't know, donate some of it for Mako's food or something. The suggestion, so at odds with the materialistic focus his parents had always encouraged, caught me by surprise. That's very thoughtful, Drake, I told him sincerely. Even small donations make a difference when people care enough to give. He nodded, looking out the window pensively. Nobody at school cares about this stuff. It's all about having the newest phone or the coolest shoes. But that shark, she almost died because someone left fishing nets in the water. That seems way more important than having the latest whatever. The insight from my 13-year-old grandson, previously obsessed with status symbols and screen time, rendered me momentarily speechless. Your grandfather would have agreed with you completely, I finally said. He believed in finding purpose beyond possessions. Dad says Grandpa Chris was really smart about stuff like that, Drake replied. He said he wishes he'd paid more attention to his advice when he was younger. This glimpse into Patrick's private reflections with his son touched me deeply. Perhaps my son was doing more soul-searching than I'd realized. When we arrived home, Drake immediately sought out Patrick to share his experience. His voice animated in a way I hadn't heard since he was a much younger child. And Grandma knew everyone there. He concluded his breathless recounting. She's like important. They all asked her advice about the sea turtles and stuff. Patrick caught my eye over Drake's head, a look of surprised appreciation crossing his features. I had no idea you were so involved at the center, Mom. There's quite a bit we don't know about each other. I observed mildly. Perhaps that's changing. The next day brought Molly's turn for grandmother time. Unlike Drake's scientific excursion, our outing was a simple beach watercolor session with my informal painting group. For other retirees who gathered weekly to capture the coastal landscapes. I'm not very good at art, Molly confessed as we settled on our beach chairs, small travel watercolor sets balanced on our knees. Miss Peterson at school said my perspective needs work. Perspective is just a technical skill that comes with practice. I assured her. Today, we're just playing with color and feeling. No judgment, no grades. The concept of creating without evaluation seemed foreign to my performance-oriented granddaughter. Stephanie had always emphasized achievement over enjoyment, enrolling Molly in competitive dance, gymnastics, and music lessons since preschool. But how will we know if it's good? She pressed. We won't concern ourselves with good, I explained. We'll focus on satisfying instead. Does the process feel engaging? Does the result please your eye? That's success in this context. Molly's brow furrowed as she considered this unfamiliar metric. Beside us, my friend Dorothy, a retired art therapist, nodded approvingly at my approach. Art is conversation, not performance, Dorothy added gently. You're having a dialogue with the paper and paint, not presenting for applause. For the first hour, Molly's attempts were stilted and self-conscious, her small body tense with the effort of doing it right. But gradually, as she watched the other painters work without self-criticism, laughing at their own splashes and unexpected color blends, her movements became more fluid, her expression more relaxed. By the time we packed up 3 hours later, Molly had produced 4 small watercolors, none technically impressive, but each progressively more joyful and uninhibited. The final one, a riot of blues and purples representing the waves, carried an emotional energy that transcended its childlike execution. Can we come back tomorrow? She asked as we packed up our supplies. This was a special session, I explained. But we could certainly set up our own painting time on the porch. Just the two of us. I'd like that, she said, slipping her small hand into mine, a gesture of physical affection she hadn't offered since toddlerhood. Back at the house, Molly proudly displayed her artwork to the family, including Harold and Evelyn, who had arrived early for dinner. It's very expressive, Stephanie commented, clearly struggling to find appropriate praise for the technically unimpressive paintings. It felt really good to make them, Molly declared with unexpected confidence. Grandma says art is about the feeling, not just how it looks. Stephanie glanced at me, a mixture of surprise and what might have been grudging appreciation in her expression. That's a valuable perspective. As the family gathered for dinner, I observed the subtle but significant shifts in our interactions. Drake enthusiastically described the Marine Center to Molly, promising to take her to see Mako on their August visit. Patrick engaged Harold in a conversation about conservation funding that managed to navigate their political differences without the usual tension. Even Stephanie and Evelyn seemed less focused on appearances, allowing Molly to serve dessert despite her slightly messy technique. Small changes, but meaningful ones. Like the first brush strokes on a blank canvas or the initial water quality adjustments for an injured shark. These were the essential foundations for something potentially transformative. That night, as I prepared for bed, I found a small handmade card slipped under my door. A watercolor wash of ocean blues with careful lettering that read, "Thank you for teaching me about art feelings. Love, Molly." I placed it on my nightstand beside Christopher's photo, a tangible symbol of new connections forming in the wake of necessary disruptions. The last days of my family's initial visit passed in a blur of beach excursions, shared meals, and the gradual easing of long-established tensions. Drake made 2 more visits to the Marine Center, returning each time with increasingly specific knowledge about shark rehabilitation. Molly and I established a daily watercolor ritual on the porch, her brushwork growing more confident with each small painting. Even Stephanie had unbent enough to join us for one session, producing a technically precise, but emotionally restrained seascape that prompted a thoughtful conversation about perfectionism. On their final morning, as Patrick loaded the SUV for their drive to Virginia, I observed my family with a sense of quiet amazement. The entitled vacationers who had arrived expecting to commandeer my house for the summer bore little resemblance to the people now preparing to depart. Drake carefully packed his marine biology books and the journal Marcus had given him to record observations. Molly organized her watercolor kit with newfound respect for the materials. Even Stephanie moved through the house with consideration, restoring each room to its original state rather than leaving a wake of disorder for me to address. "We'll see you in 3 weeks," Patrick reminded me as he closed the trunk. August 12th, as agreed. "I'll have your rooms ready, I promised. The real rooms, not the haunted versions." His lips twitched with suppressed amusement. "I appreciate that, though I'm keeping the rubber crab Molly found as insurance." "A wise precaution," I acknowledged solemnly. As the family gathered for final goodbyes, Harold and Evelyn joining us from the bed and breakfast where they'd spent their stay, I was surprised by the genuine warmth of their embraces. Drake's gangly teenage hug lingered longer than usual. Molly pressed a final watercolor into my hands, a family portrait of sorts, with colorful blobs representing each of us standing before a blue ocean backdrop. "It's all of us at your house," she explained earnestly. "See, that's you in the purple shirt. And that's me holding my paintbrush. And there's Drake talking about sharks." "It's beautiful," I told her, meaning it despite the childlike execution. "I'll frame it for the living room." Most surprising was Stephanie's farewell. A careful hug followed by an unexpected admission. "This visit turned out very differently than I expected, Meredith." "In a good way. Thank you for everything." The deliberate vagueness acknowledged our unspoken understanding about Operation Empty Nest Defense without directly referencing it. A diplomatic choice that showed more self-awareness than I'd previously credited her with possessing. As the SUV pulled away, Jorge emerged from his house to join me on the porch, watching the departing vehicle with undisguised curiosity. "So, the invaders have retreated," he observed. "Temporarily, at least." "How is the occupation?" "Surprisingly successful," I admitted. The negotiations yielded better terms than I expected. "No further need for tactical saxophone deployments." Then I laughed. "I think conventional diplomacy will suffice for the August visit, though I'm keeping your number on speed dial just in case." The 3 weeks between visits passed in a pleasant rhythm of my own making. Volunteer shifts at the Marine Center, watercolor sessions with my beach group, quiet dinners with Jorge and other friends from town. I even attended a jazz concert with David, the literature professor I'd been cautiously getting to know before my family's arrival. The freedom to structure my days without accommodation or explanation felt like a luxury, one I'd earned through boundaries rather than capitulation. I did make certain preparations for my family's return, though none involving cardboard cutouts or temperature-shifting showers. Instead, I stocked art supplies for Molly, arranged additional volunteer opportunities for Drake at the Marine Center, and researched local activities that might appeal to everyone's emerging interests rather than just Stephanie and Evelyn's shopping preferences. When August 12th arrived, the SUV that pulled into my driveway contained a family subtly transformed by the week since our last interaction. Drake's gaming device remained tucked away as he eagerly pointed out coastal features to his sister. Molly clutched a sketchbook filled with practice drawings from her Virginia visit. Even Patrick and Stephanie seemed more relaxed, less concerned with appearances and status than I'd ever observed. "Welcome back," I greeted them, holding the door open. "How was Virginia?" "Educational," Patrick replied with meaningful emphasis. Stephanie's cousin, Roger, has 4 children who are not permitted screens of any kind during family gatherings. It was an adjustment for our 2. "Dad made us play board games every night," Drake reported. His tone suggesting this primitive entertainment had proven surprisingly acceptable. "And we had to talk to actual people at meals." "The horror," I commented dryly. "It was weird at first," he admitted. But Roger's kids know all these card games, and his daughter Emily is really into marine biology too. She's volunteered at the Virginia Aquarium since she was 14. Interesting, I thought. A peer with similar interests but different values had made more impact in reinforcing Drake's new passion than any number of parental lectures could have achieved. Stephanie joined us in the entryway, looking somewhat more casual than her usual carefully curated self. Meredith, the house looks lovely. Thank you for hosting us again. The genuine warmth in her voice suggested the Virginia visit had indeed been educational for the adults as well as the children. Patrick had mentioned that Roger was a successful corporate attorney like Stephanie's father, but with decidedly different priorities regarding work-life balance and conspicuous consumption. Perhaps seeing an alternative model of success had prompted some reconsideration. As they settled into their rooms, the same ones they'd occupied during their previous stay, minus any hauntings or wildlife, I observed the subtle but significant differences in their behavior. They moved through my house with respect rather than entitlement, recognized boundaries without requiring enforcement, and genuinely engaged with the environment rather than merely occupying space. That evening, as we gathered on the porch for dinner, Molly presented me with a gift, a framed collage of watercolor postcards she had created during their Virginia stay. I practiced every day, she told me proudly. And Karen, that's Mom's cousin's wife. She used to teach art and she showed me some techniques. See how the waves have more movement in this one? Your progress is remarkable, I told her sincerely, noting the genuine improvement in her brushwork. You've developed your own style. Patrick caught my eye over his daughter's head, his expression conveying silent gratitude for the creative spark our painting sessions had ignited. The connection between us felt different now. Not the careful difference of a child to parent or the entitled expectations of an adult son, but something closer to true adult kinship, rooted in mutual respect. After dinner, as the children explored the beach for night creatures with special flashlights Drake had requested specifically for this purpose, Patrick and Stephanie lingered on the porch with me, watching the moon rise over the ocean. We've been thinking, Patrick began, his tone suggesting careful consideration rather than impulsive decision-making about holidays this year. Traditionally, we've hosted at our house with your obligatory day before visit that never quite allowed you to be part of the actual celebration. I nodded, recognizing his accurate assessment of our typical holiday pattern. The perfunctory pre-Christmas dinner, where I delivered gifts and received formal thanks before being dispatched back to my solitude, while the real family celebration occurred the following day. We were wondering, Stephanie continued, surprising me by taking the lead, if you might consider hosting Thanksgiving here at the beach house, all of us, including Amelia and her family, if they can make it from Seattle. The invitation or request, depending on perspective, hung in the night air. 6 months ago, it would have represented another assumption of my availability and resources. Now, shaped by our summer experiences, it felt like a genuine attempt at inclusion. I'd like that very much, I replied simply. As Patrick and Stephanie outlined their preliminary thoughts for the holiday gathering, I gazed out at the ocean where my grandchildren's flashlight beams bounced along the shoreline. The journey from that first confrontational phone call to this peaceful evening had been unexpected in its twists and challenges. Yet here we were, reconfigured but intact, a family finding its way toward more authentic connection. Christopher would have been amused by my methods, but approving of the results. He had always maintained that families, like the ocean, required both calm and storm to remain healthy. Periods of peaceful coexistence punctuated by necessary disruptions that cleared away accumulated debris and created space for new growth. As I watched the moonlight silvering the waves, I silently thanked him for the legacy of resilience he had left us and for the unexpected gift his absence had ultimately provided. The opportunity for all of us to rediscover each other and ourselves in the spaces between loss and renewal. Thanks so much for tuning in. Drop a comment below with your score from 0 to 10. Hit that subscribe button and pass this tale along to someone you know.